I wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive into Mishkan, and it's so interesting in that there's like five parshios that really focus on the Mishkan, so much more so than any other topic. So I wanted to just spend the day on this, and we'll see where this takes us. So I think to get started, I think we're all sort of aware of the idea that of the connection between the Mishkan and Shabbos, in that the 39 malachos are derived from, the 39 malachos we don't do on Shabbos are derived from the malacha that we did in order to build the Mishkan, and that's learned out from the juxtaposition between the parshios of that in a couple of places. Here we have the first source we've got in Kitisa, but it also happens again later on in Vayakel, where we have that juxtaposition between building the Mishkan and Shabbos. So we'll just start out with this because this first source sort of gets us there a little bit, and then we're going to keep sort of trying to build upon it and see, again, just sort of see where this takes us. So in Kisisa, the parsha, this is sort of in the middle of the parsha. It says, Re'ei karasi b'shem etzala ben uri ben chur lamata Yehuda ve'amale oso ela ruach elokim bechachma utvuna ubedas. So we're going to see this. This is sort of interesting in that what does it require in order to build all of the different kelim of the Mishkan? And the pasuk tells us that Bitzalo had chachma, tvuna, and das. So we'll see what, I guess what the implications are of that. But again, right after it describes the building of the making of the kelim, it jumps right into so again, we see that juxtaposition between the Mishkan and Shabbos. So let's try to understand, though, what about the connection between Mishkan and Ma'aseh Bereshis and creation? And we'll sort of try to build these different connections and see where that sort of takes us. So there's a medrash in Tanhuma and Pekudei. It says, Amar Rabbi Yaakov b'Rabbi Yasi, Lamahu Omer Hashem ahavti ma'on beisecha makom mishkan kvodecha. So it's a pasuk in Tehillim where it's talking about makom mishkan kvodecha, which seems to be about the Mishkan, mishvur sheshako keneged bria sa'olam. So there's this idea that the Mishkan seems to be sort of weighed against the creating of the world in its in totality. Keza Bereshim Ksiv Bereshis Bara Elokim Esa Shemayim Vesa Aretz Uksiv Nota Shemayim Kayiriya, but Mishkan Maksiv Asisa Yirios Izim. So this medrash, and we won't go through all of it, but in this medrash, it's sort of comparing notes between what's talked about by Ma'aseh Bereshis and what's talked about in the building of the Mishkan. This first example, it says in the pasuk in Tehillim, says that Hashem sort of created or set aside Shemayim Kair like a curtain. That Shemayim was a curtain. But Mishkan, it says V'asisa Yirios Yazim. So we have Yirios also in the Mishkan. So, and in this medrash, it sort of compares and contrasts how similar language is used in Ma'aseh Bereshis as it is in the Mishkan. So we're starting to get a hint of clearly Chazal are trying to make that connection. But what does that mean? In more specifics. So there's a Psikta Rabasi, that's another medrash, that quotes from the pasuk by Shlomo HaMelech when he builds the first Beis Hamikdash. And it says, V'tishlam kol hamelacha asher asa HaMelech Shlomo Beis Hashem. So there's a whole bunch to this medrash, but we're sort of cutting it in the middle. And it says, Davar acher v'tishalim kol hamelacha ein ksiv kan ela kol hamelacha. So we have an extra word. We have this extra word of kol hamelacha. What does it mean? So melechas sheshes yemei bereshis mikol melechto asher bara Elokim la'asos. Asa ein ksiv kan ela la'asos. So by the building of the Beis Hamikdash, we have a this Musar language that Kol HaMalacha, and we have something that's also sort of interesting by the end of Ma'aseh Bereshis, where the pasuk says that Hashem rested, he stopped, he ceased from all of the malacha which he created to do, la'asos. And everybody sort of asks, what do you mean la'asos? It should say asa in ksiv kan ela la'asos. It should have said that he did. What does it mean la'asos? Sounds like he's continuing to do. So there are those, there's one explanation, like we say the first of the Birchas Kriya Shema in the morning, where we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to create the world every day. It's a continuing effort, and if HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't do so, then the world would cease to exist. But this is going in a bit of a different track. So he says Yesh Malacha, or the Medrash says Yesh Malacha Acheres. Kevin Shabbos Shlomo Ubana Beis Hamikdash Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Achshav Shoma Meleches Hashemayim Va'aretz. Now that the Beis Hamikdash has been built, the whole creation of Shemayim and Aretz is completed. Vatishalim Kol HaMalacha. That is what it means. Vatishalim Kol HaMalacha. That's talked about by the Beis Hamikdash. Lekach Nikra Shlomo. Why is Shlomo Melech named Shlomo? That's why. Shehishlim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Melecha Sheshes Yemei Bereshis Letoch Ma'aseh Yadav, because he created what HaKadosh Baruch Hu had started with the Ma'aseh Bereshis. So there seems to be, again, what we're seeing is this idea that the Mishkan, and in this case the Beis Hamikdash, becomes maybe a completion of Ma'aseh Bereshis. Okay, but let's again, we're going to try and keep building upon this. So Rav Chaim Volozhner, in the Nefesh HaChaim, in one of the notes in Shar Aleph Perek Daled, he says, Ki hamishkan v'hamikdash hayu kolim kol hakochos v'halomos v'kol hasidrei kedushos kulam. That the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash included all of the powers and the worlds and all of the order of the different types of holiness. Kol batav ugnazachav aliyosa v'chedrav v'chol klei hakodesh. Every aspect, every different part, in all the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan were part of this. Kulam hayu bedugma eliyona. They're all sort of from this lofty, or this template created from above. Tselem demus tavnis haolamos hakadoshim v'sidrei pirkei hamerkava, that they follow the example and how they need to be created, following the example of the worlds, the holy worlds, and the order of the different parts of their merkava. Now, we're going to keep to the Nigla here. I certainly can't even start to talk about the Nister, but clearly, even in the Nigla, there is we can talk about some of these concepts of what the worlds mean and the Merkava, and all of this seems to be connected with how the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash were built, and all of the minutiae. And you think about, like, in all these parshios, what's I think to me truly amazing about them is you look at the fine detail of every keli that's, whether it's the Aron, the Shulchan, this week's Parsha, the Kior, the Mizbechos, everything is really outlined in very specific order. And then Chazal on top of that, have to add in even more detail of how it was built. And it seems like from what we're starting to glean from this is that there is a purpose of this in order to sort of fit in with what these heavenly worlds are. Hema Yisad David Ushmuel Haroah, and this is really what the foundation that David and Shmuel Hanavi built, right? Because all of this, the Beis Hamikdash was really started, even though it wasn't built by David HaMelech. David and Shmuel really started to put all the plans into effect, and Shlomo HaMelech was the one who actually got to build it. But it was certainly already the foundations were being set by David and Shmuel. And the pasuk in Divrei Yomim is a kol miyad Hashem aleihem hiskil kol malachos atavnis. Right, so it's all coming from understanding, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu's, providing the understanding for how to build all the different components of the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. So the Emek Davar, the Netziv, is now, again, I think each one of these sources is giving us a little bit more of a glimpse or a little bit of a deeper understanding. So as we continue to build this, the Netziv sort of takes us a step back, right? So we talked about in the first source where we talked about Betzalel, and it says Bechachma utvuna b'das, that Betzalel was bestowed with these three different aspects of his ability to think and to understand and how to create all of the kelim for the Mishkan. So the Netziv says, Kvar nizbar dechol ha'olamos nicholu b'maaseh Mishkan. And again, this is sort of what we're already seeing, right? Is that all the worlds are included in the Maaseh Mishkan, the Kelev, and the Kelim that were part of it. Mishum hachi shachna shchina bo k'ma shahaya merosh habriya shahaya hashchina bo olamo bechlal mashgiach. Right. So I think he's giving us now a deeper insight and saying that all of the different components of the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan had to be built just so in order to have the Shekhinah rest, to have the Shekhinah come down and be part of the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash, just like it was during the times of, or at the beginning when Hashem was creating the world and he was sort of being mashgiach over, overseeing all the different parts and really being part of the world. וכמו שהעולם בכלל נברא בשלוש מידות אלו, כדכתיב השם בחוכמה יסד ארץ כונן שמיים בתבונה בדעת תהומos nivku. And this is he's quoting a pasuk from Mishlei, and he's comparing the language of Hashem creating the world with Chachma, Tvuna, Das, using the same language as what's described by Betzalel. So Kacha HaMishkan Nidrash Libanos B'Shalosh Midos Halalu, and that's why the Mishkan also had to be created, because again, if we're connecting the Mishkan to sort of completing the Ma'aseh Bereshis, then the creation of the Mishkan is going to have to follow suit with the creation of the world. He quotes, he says it from Rabbah, although in my copy of the Emek Davar, it's quoting the Gemara in Brachos, so I'm not sure, maybe it also appears in the Midrash Rabbah, I don't know. But it says, the Gemara in Brachos says, Yada Betzalel, Shemos Litzarf Osir Shebehen Nivra Shemayim Va'aretz. That the Gemara tells us that Betzalel understood how to sort of connect the names and the letters of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name in order to create Shemayim Va'aretz. He understood all that, how that worked. V'dimtze mevor lashon ruach elokim shezeh Hashem mashmo hiper shabara Shemayim Va'aretz k'mar shekasavti reish parshas Bereshis. So in order to be able to create the Mishkan in a way that you could have Hashras Shechina, Betzalel had to understand how all these different things fit together, including how all the different names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, it's clearly, again, we're already drifting into the realms of the Nister, but the idea being that somehow to connect the two worlds together through the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash, everything has to be just so to sort of build that conduit. Okay, so we're, I think now we're starting to understand a little bit better as to what this means, that the Mishkan, becomes the ultimate, completion, and so does the Beis HaMikdash becomes the ultimate completion of the of Ma'aseh Bereshis, because that really was the essence of Ma'aseh Bereshis, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world so that we could connect to the divine, and that's what the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash are also all about, is how as enabling us, right, to connect to the divine in this world. The Beis HaLevi, in this Torah, the Beis HaLevi really brings it, I think, with maybe expands on it a little bit, maybe broadens it out a little bit better so we could understand it. And this is actually going on our Parsha Kitisa, talking a little bit about the Chet HaEgel, so tying it right, very nicely into this week's Parsha. And then, like I said, I think broadening it out. So let's take a look at how the Beis HaLevi understands this. And again, this is still within the confines of understanding how the Mishkan sort of connects back to Ma'aseh Bereshis and to connecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it says, He says, "V'hine b'maaseh ha'egel, kavod dibru rabim, ma ra'u Yisrael kacha v'heich dor deya ka'osa hador nechshelu b'chet gadol kazeh." Right. This is, and he says, there's already been a lot of discussion about Chet HaEgel. How could it have happened? How could this generation that I refer to as the Dor Deya, the generation of understanding, or they're the ones who saw the Makos, they saw Kriyas Yamsuf, they saw everything that happened to Amalek, they saw Maimon or Sinai. How did they fall victim or fall prey to this terrible hate? So he says, "V'asher neradi adu b'chol mitzvah yesh ba ta'amim v'kavanos haramzim l'sodos nistorim." He says that it's a known thing, hopefully it's a known thing, I guess, that each mitzvah has different reasons, and it has different hints about it, hints to those things that are secret, right, that are hidden, again, sort of getting into the nister. But each mitzvah has its own connections into these secrets. And v'al yedei kiyum hamitzvah nasim tikunim v'sidarim b'chol ha'olamos ha'oyonim k'mevor kol zeh b'sefer harishonim. And through the kiyum of each individual mitzvah, that is, each one is unique, we are able to do these tikunim, these fixings. Again, we're not going to try to understand what all that means, but at least we can sort of understand that somehow that's helping us to connect with the divine and helping us to sort of build a world that can, as a whole, can connect to the divine. So v'hinei nitfas l'dimyon mitzvah shel malechas hamishkan. So let's talk about, he says, let's talk specifically about malechas hamishkan. Shehaya bo hashras shchina v'gilui kvodo yizbarach. So the Mishkan probably really focuses more on bringing down the Shekhinah and the revelation, right, of the kavod of Hashem Yisbarach. Halovade shekol ma shenasa bo bechol pratav yesh behem ta'amim ne'elamim. Right, each different component, again, like we said earlier, each of the kelim has all this minutia and all the details about how to build it, and each one of those has different reasons that are hidden. Right? And you have to have each one of those in order to sort of create a physical place where you can have hashras hashchina. The Mishkan kulo bichlol v'chol kelav kol echad beprat ramzim lasodos ha'yonim b'sisrei ma'aseh merkava, because there's this connection to the whole ma'aseh merkava, into all these different, and it seems like there's a whole bunch of different items or different elements that have to be just right. V'sidrei ma'aseh bereshis v'kol ha'olamos v'skashrusam zeh b'zeh. And it all sort of fits with the organization of ma'aseh bereshis and includes all these worlds and how to make the connection between all the worlds and the Mishkan to get it all sort of aligned perfectly. That's what is required in order to be able to accomplish the goal of Hashras Shechina that we had in the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. And so he says, hypothetically speaking, and this is sort of interesting, hypothetically speaking, that if you could possibly with human intellect, if you had a special person that had already come to understanding all the secrets of Hashem, and understood all of how the order of Bereshis and the Merkava, he would be able to understand on his own you might be able to understand like how to build a Mishkan with all these different details. And again, if you understood all of the hidden secrets of the world, and really understood how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, with that knowledge and that understanding, you could probably come up with in your own mind, without Hashem having to say, this is how you have to create the Mishkan. You could probably do that. You could probably sort of figure out the mechanics behind it. V'inyan zehu, the Bikshu Yisrael, az acharei sharo de Moshe, asher haya omed bein Hashem uveinam lo ba. So this is maybe what's going on when you have Yisrael, who sees now that Moshe, who had always been this intermediary between them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and now that he's delayed, he's not coming. Ratzu lazos makam yuchad shehiyeh mesugo asher bo yihiyeh hashras shechinaso. That maybe what they were thinking is, if we don't have Moshe, let's at least have a place that can sort of become a physical place, that can sort of become this intermediate for us, where Shekhinah just comes in that one specific place. And that's really what ended up happening. And because they understood the Nistarim, because of what they had experienced up until now, they wanted to know how to do it. Lo samchu al chachmas atzman v'alkein halchu el Aharon HaKohen shahayu gadol mehem v'hu yada omek hadvarim b'sodoseim yoser mekulam. So they didn't want to, sort of take this project on themselves and say, you know what, we can figure out how to create this Mishkan, this thing that we want to create. Rather, that's why they went to Aaron HaKohen and said, he understands it even deeper than we do. So, ubikshu mimenu kuma selanu v'chulei. And that's why they came to Aharon HaKohen and said, please, make for us. V'hakavana shehiyeh makom yuchal l'shras Shechina. And that was their intention, was for him to create a place for Hashras HaShechina. V'nimsa, so clearly, by the way, the Beis HaLevi is not going like the other Meforshim. I mean, there's plenty of other Meforshim who talk about this as being truly Avodah Zarah, and that's clearly not his Mahalach. So just to say they're not everyone sees it like this. But I think with the Beis HaLevi is also giving us more insights through this description of what exactly the Mishkan was and how it operated. V'nimsa machshavosim shel Yisrael haya bezel latova, and this was they really had good intentions. Sheyizku ayidei malachim zu lashrosh Shechina etzlam, and what they wanted to accomplish through it. Okay, amnam. So what's the problem? Tohu bezeh tohus echod. The big mistake that they made, hein emes de ma'aseh hadam be'olam hatachron gorem tikudim v'sidorim tovim b'chol ha'olamos kulam ki hein gezer haboris borach asher olamos yihya misnahagim al pi ma'aseh ha'adam bezeh ha'olam. He says the biggest problem was that we can't do this on our own unless we are commanded, unless there's a gezerah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do this, to sort of connect these worlds and to do this in the right and proper way and at the right and proper time. But it's not something we can take on ourselves or decide that this is what's appropriate. Amnam kol zehu rak im oza ha'ma'aseh tzivsa alav Torah la'asoso. V'chein b'ma'aseh mishkan rak az asher tzivam Hashem la'asoso. It was only until HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually gave us that tzivoy of building it. Ba'asuli mikdash b'shachanti b'socham, right? But until he tells us that, b'chol pratav, in all the details, v'ash keshekayemu tzivav la'asoso kecho asher tzivam az nasu kol tikunim l'mala. You have to realize, he says, in order to make all these fixings, again, we don't understand what all that means. Certainly I don't. But you can't even start to sort of make these tikunim unless there's a tziva from the beginning. We have to be commanded from the beginning. You can't have the hashchas hashchina until you have the zechus of us performing those mitzvos. That's really, I think, maybe what he's saying is that's the first step. The first step is sort of bridging the gap between our world and that of the divine, is that we first have to obey and perform the mitzvahs that we are commanded. Az oso maisa eno moel klum. But if we do it on our own, it's not going to be helpful. It's not, and it could even be counterproductive. To maisa mitzad atzmo lo yifo bezeh shechina zu aleim. Be'ikar atikunim becho hamaisim hu masha osa rotzam baru belav hachi ena marak tachbulos enoshi. Without us doing the rotzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and with the right actions at the right time, it's simply our own human scheming, and that's it. V'chol his chachmos lo yoel meuma ki mi yomar lo ma'atifal. Because if it weren't for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it can be successful anyway. Nothing can actually work and be built. V'yadarabba od lachto gadol yechoshev. It's considered to be a great chait if we try to do these things on our own, because it's as if kiviyachol we're sort of usurping HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rule. V'alkein nechshu b'maasehem, and that's how they tripped up in this whole plan, in this whole action. And what was the result? Not hashchas hashchina with a Mishkan, but rather an egel comes out, something that seems to be very close to avodah zarah. And maybe that's really what he's hinting at, is that if we sort of go down the right, we're going down the path that we think is going to lead us to connection to the divine, but if we're not doing it in the proper way, it ends up going off the path and really just ending up in avodah zarah. And afterwards, what came out is what came out. When Moshe came down, saw what was going on, and then started to daven on our behalf, he said, this is still your people. They weren't trying to stray away from you. Really, they wanted to connect you, and that's really the essence of Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillah was, their actions were truly wrong, but their intentions were at least correct, and that certainly gave Kadosh Baruch Hu the space to sort of to correct it. There's another question about this, whether the Mishkan was going to be commanded to us even before the Chet HaEgel, or was it only because of the Chet HaEgel? Again, there's a lot of discussion back and forth, but either way, what we're seeing, I think, is through the Beis Halevi, the way he expands upon this, is that it really is all of the details that sort of bridge the gap, and especially only when you marry all of those details of the tzivoy with the tzivoy itself, right? So we have all of the requirements of how to build the Beis Hamikdash or the Mishkan with all the kelim in a very specific way, and you couple that with the tzivoy. That's what sort of connects the Mishkan back to Ma'aseh Bereshis, which brings down HaKadosh Baruch Hu into our presence. So, it's again, I feel like it's still a little bit abstract, but maybe gives us a little bit of a better insight into how the two connect together. Really quickly, I just wanted to maybe round this out by saying, okay, what about Shabbos though? Connecting Shabbos back to, we have Shabbos in the Mishkan through the Malachos of what we don't do on Shabbos, but how does that connect us back to Ma'aseh Bereshis? And I think I didn't bring in a source for this, but when you think about Ma'aseh Bereshis and how the Malach of Ma'aseh Bereshis finishes or completes at Shabbos. And so when HaKadosh Baruch Hu there's a shvisas hamalacha, right? He ceases to do malacha, and that's what we are doing as well. We are ceasing to do malacha, and the malacha that we cease to do is specifically those malachas that were used to build the Mishkan. So it's sort of for full circle that, and maybe that in the words of, I believe it's Rav Levi Yitzchak that said, and I think this is attributed to him. He said the Beis Hamikdash is the connection to the divine in a physical space, and the analogy to that we have today, even though we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, is that Shabbos is also a connection to the divine, but in time, not in physical space.